Before viewing video lessons, it is important to read the textbook using the learning guide as your turn-by-turn directions. Then use the learning guide to take organized notes in your own words with examples and pictures. In this video, we will be continuing our lesson on stress, coping, and health with our focus on the physiological response to stress. So as we have discussed previously, you have potentially stressful events that are filtered through your subjective cognitive appraisal, and how you view those events has a big impact on your responses. Events that are viewed as threatening, that overwhelm your coping skills or resources, trigger what we call stressful responses. We've already discussed the emotional responses. Now we're going to focus on the physiological responses. The physiological response to stress is governed by the hypothalamus. As we learned in Chapter 3 when we worked on the brain, the hypothalamus governs our basic biological urges, things like hunger and thirst. It also governs the autonomic nervous system and can communicate with the endocrine system. And so it turns out that the hypothalamus, when it encounters stress, will trigger responses in these two systems. So when you perceive a stressor and the hypothalamus recognizes that there is a threat, it triggers responses along these two different pathways. So along the nervous system, in the autonomic nervous system, it will send a message to the adrenal gland, which tells the adrenal gland to secrete a set of hormones called catecholamines. These catecholamines are responsible for sort of the classic fight or flight response symptoms. So things like racing heart, you're breathing heavier, you start to sweat or perspire, your muscles tense up. Those sort of symptoms are part of the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system being activated. At the same time, the hypothalamus sends this message along nerve pathways. It also sends a message to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is the master gland of the endocrine system. What the pituitary gland will do is then secrete a hormone that's carried through the bloodstream and eventually reaches the adrenal gland. When this hormone reaches the adrenal gland, it tells the adrenal gland to release a different set of hormones called corticosteroids. These particular hormones are designed to help mobilize energy to fuel the processes the catecholamines have set into place. They also decrease inflammation. So anytime you perceive a stressor, your hypothalamus, if it hears you stressing in your head, oh my goodness, this is terrible, this is awful, the hypothalamus triggers this response in the body. Now, for our ancestors, this response was awesome. So let's say they go out hunting for something to eat and they encounter a tiger. Well, this response is awesome because in order to live, they're either going to have to fight off that tiger or run away from the tiger. For us, it's not such a great system because it turns out your hypothalamus is kind of stupid. It doesn't know the difference between a tiger that requires a big physiological response and a bill you have to pay, or a paper you have to write, or a test you have to study for. And so the hypothalamus is going to trigger off the same response to all stress, whether or not it requires a physical response or not. Now, this has been studied extensively for a long time. So back in the 1930s, Hans Selye actually took a look at this fight or flight response And what he found is we actually go through something called the general adaptation syndrome in response to the modern type of stressors that we have. So when you first encounter a stressor, you do go through this classic fight or flight response. And this is awesome if it's a short-term stressor that requires you to physically respond and either fight or run away. Unfortunately, the next test in this class or the next report you have to write in this class, your bills, the problems you might be having with a coworker at work or a family member, these aren't the kind of things that we can deal with in a short amount of time. And they're not the kind of things that really fighting or running away is going to be helpful to deal with. So these kind of long-term chronic stressors eventually get us to the stage of resistance. And in resistance, what we find is that we sort of have extra energy because of those corticosteroids being secreted, and we feel pretty good. This is resistance. This is the plateau phase. This is the phase that some of you like to get into when you wait to the last minute to work on a report or study for a test. This is the reason why some people say, well, if I wait till the last minute, I feel really focused. Well, what you're really doing is you're putting yourself into a state of resistance. But what this is really doing is pickling your body in stress hormones. So what you're doing is you're chronically dosing yourself with these stress hormones. This eventually leads to exhaustion. So you've depleted all of your natural physiological resources, your hormones are tapped out, your energy stores are tapped out, and the process of releasing all of these hormones has actually damaged your body. And so in the state of exhaustion, you get disease and you get inhibited or hindered neurogenesis. This means that you're not going to be capable of learning and remembering because your brain cannot build new connections between neurons. And so in our physiological response to stress, what we see is a lot of hormonal and nervous system activation. And unfortunately, in our modern world, where most of our stressors don't require fighting or running away, we found that there is a big health impact to this chronic stress that we're under. What we find is that we used to die from things that were sort of contagious diseases, and after we developed vaccines and sterilization and understood what caused those diseases, the death rates really dropped. But what has increased are stress-related deaths, or deaths due to pickling ourselves in stress hormones all the time. It turns out that our behaviors and how we manage our stress can have a big impact on our health and our life. So there's a little game at this website, and we'll just do a little quick version of it here on the video, but I'd like everybody to go to this particular website. There's a link on our Blackboard page to this as well, and play the game and just look and see what kind of factors have a big impact on our health. So we're going to play this game, and we're going to kind of put in an average age college student.
How you doing?
We're going to make him a guy from the beginning. And we're going to start out with a guy who has a little bit of a weight problem because this has been an issue in our country. So this is going to give him a BMI or body mass index of 27, which is in the overweight category. Okay, your family history of cardiovascular disease is not one that you can really do anything about in your own lifetime, but we're going to just pick one here that is pretty common. Next, we're going to look at his blood pressure, and we're going to say that he probably has high blood pressure, and as a 22-year-old probably doesn't even know it. So it's not under control. We're going to start out with a guy who has a hard time handling stress, so he feels overwhelmed. We're going to have him not engaging in any kind of regular activity. We're going to have his fruits and vegetables come in the form of fried potatoes. He's not eating well. I'm going to make him buckle up because I think at this point most Americans are buckling up. So he's going to buckle up when he drives. As a 22-year-old guy, the insurance company was going to tell us that he's had some accidents. That's one of the reasons why his insurance costs a little bit more. And he's going to drink, part of how he manages his stress. And we're in Jefferson County, and we know that we have a high rate of smoking. So he's going to be a smoker. And he has inhaled when using drugs. So when we started this exercise, he had a potential lifespan of about 74, and now we've dropped that down to 38. So now let's make some different decisions and see how we can change his life. Okay, our first choice is to give him a normal body mass index. So he's got a body mass index now of 23. We can't change his family history of cardiovascular disease, so we're going to leave that one. But we are going to have him get that blood pressure under control. We're going to teach him how to manage his stress. He's going to start exercising, and he doesn't even have to be a marathon runner. He's going to learn to love fruits and vegetables that aren't fried. He's buckling up already. Let's become a better driver. Let's drink an appropriate amount, which for a man would be 2 drinks per day maximum. For women, that would be 1 drink per day maximum. We're going to quit. And let's not use drugs. So you can see that he over doubled his life. And most of those years are probably going to be healthy and productive years. So as you can see, there is a big relationship between stress, health, and disease. In fact, we have a whole field of psychology devoted to studying health, called health psychology. And when we look at diseases, we find that all diseases are related to psychology, behavior, and stress. These make them all psychosomatic.